everyone. So welcome to this video. For this video today, I'm going to be showing you guys how to use intents to pass information from one screen to the next. So let's say we type our name in. Um, you would like your name to show up over here and also in our third screen. So I'm just going to quickly run through creating our third screen. I might just like fast forward through this, but it's pretty much the same thing that we did in previous episodes. So it's nothing too special. Third screen for the contacts, so it's nothing too crazy. Just one thing you want to keep in mind is that you have this written in as your ID over here is something that you can tell what it is. So for me, I wrote this in as display name, um, because we're going to be changing the name over here. So just make sure that you have a good ID that you can recognize. And we're also going to be using this button. So just make sure it has a clear ID. For me, it's something simple. It's button two. So it's nothing too crazy. So what we're going to do is we're going to move to the Kotlin side of things and we're going to pass the input from here onto our title over here. And we're also going to move from page to page. So whenever we click on the Let's Go button, it'll take us to this page. And if we click on Next, then it'll take us to our third page over here. And once we click on this here, it'll take us back to our first page. So that's pretty much the goal for today. Let's start off by first going to main activity. And just some things you want to keep in mind is that you want to keep track of what you wrote in here for the input and when you're clicking the button. So just keep track of those two things. Now, if you select on it in the back, you can see that it shows this section over here. Now, this ID is like pretty long, so I'm also just going to refactor this, click on rename, change this to input text, so it's something easy. And for this button, we'll just keep it as button. So let's just keep it in as that. Now, in our main activity page, the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to start by creating some variables in as button two. And this is for the button. So if you see the option where it just shows you the button over here, just write that down. For this one, I'm going to write late init var text input. I am just going to call it text input. And this is just going to be for our edit text. And let's now assign these variables. So inside of onCreate, right here, I'm for button two, I'm going to use the find view by ID method, and I'm going to call on our IDs that we wrote. So for this one, remember we called it input text, and for this one we simply called it button. So we're going to use that. So in here, I'm going to write r.id, and for this, I'm just going to write it in as a button. And for our text input, I guess like for this, it doesn't really need to be button two. We'll just keep it in as button, just button. And for here, I'm going to write find view by ID, r.id dot input text. So now we have these two over here. All right, the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to set an on-click listener for our button. And so for this button, I'm going to write set on-click listener. And what we're going to do is we're going to extract our name and we're going, like, as in, we're going to extract the name, whatever the person writes in here, and we're going to pass it on to our next screen over here. So for that, what we're going to do is we're first going to write a value called name, and I'm going to take the text input from it, take the specific text, change it to toString and then trim. So like let's say if someone writes their name in as Aisha and then they put in like a bunch of spaces, the trim is essentially going to remove all that extra white space. So, we're not using all of that and passing it on to the next page. So I'm going to create is a value for intent. So I'm going to start by writing intent in here. And the first parameter is this. And the intent basically works like this. It's like, where do you want to go? Where are you right now? And where do you want to go? So right now I'm in this. So I'm in main activity. Where I want to go next is the hobbies activity page. And so for the hobbies activity page, we're going to reference the Kotlin file. So that is the hobbies activity. And here I'm going to write class.java. And so this is our intent. Now, if it's giving you this red, um, if it's giving you this red color, just make sure you click on import class so that you can see the import at the top for intent. Okay. Now, the next thing you're gonna do is you want to make sure you pass on the name. So for that, what you're gonna write here is intent dot put extra, and let's just write this in as username, and we're gonna put our name in here. Now, for this, we're going to write start activity and write in here intent. And that is pretty much it. So this is what passes on our name. It basically puts it inside of username. And the start activity tells you, hey, now that you've clicked on this button, make sure that you move from this page onto the hobbies activity. So that is essentially what the set on click listener is for. It's saying that when you click on this button, do the following over here. Make sure you're getting the name, you're passing it on to the next page, and you're moving on to the next page, which is hobbies activity. So now let's go into hobbies activity. And if we take a look at hobbies activity, what we want to do is we want to make sure that we are changing the title here. So we're making sure we get the name and pass it in here. And we also want to make sure that we track when the button is being clicked. So what we're going to start off by doing is the same thing that we did before. We're going to create some variables over here. And I'm going to call this first one a title username. And so if we take a look at hobbies activity, it's always good to make sure that you know what the IDs are. So for this one here, the ID is title view. And then for this one here, for the next button, it's just called next button. Okay. Now here, if we take a look again, I'm sorry, I'm switching a lot, but you can see the type for this view is text view. And so for our hobbies activity, we're going to write text view here because that's the type of the variable. Now for button 2, it's simply the button. So I'm just going to write that here. And inside of the onCreate, we're going to set our variables. I'm going to use find view by ID, r.id, and then this one is the title view. Our button 2, we're going to write find view by ID, r.id.next button. And now what we want to do is we want to make sure that we can get the name that we passed in. So for that, I'm also just going to write value name here. And I'm going to write intent. And we recall that we had used the putExtra method. Now to get the string, we're going to write getStringExtra. And remember that we had wrote in the previous string. So if I go over here, remember as username. So here in our hobbies activity, we're also going to write that in as username. And now what we can do is we can take the title username and change the text into something like this here. So I'm just going to copy and paste it to show you guys. But Here, what we're doing is we're using the name, and if they don't pass in the name, that we're going to simply replace it with user. And here is just some extra text, which says, here are my favorite hobbies. Now, for the button click, what we want to do is we want to set an on-click listener. So I'm going to write set on-click listener. And we set that when we click on our hobbies page and click on next, we want to be taken to our contact page. So for this page over here, so we're essentially going to be creating another intent. So for that, I'm just going to write contact intent, create a value for that. And then I'm going to write intent, this. And in here, I'm going to write contact activity, class.java. And if you see this red, remember to just click on import. And for contact intent, I'm going to write putExtra. So now we want to make sure that we are also passing in the name again, because in contact activity, we also want to replace this here with the name that we passed in. So for this, I'm going to write another username, but we'll just give it username 2. And I'm going to pass in the same name. And for that, then we just write start activity, and then I'm going to put the intent inside, and that is pretty much it. So this pretty much concludes it for the second screen. Um, Now let's move on to our third screen. So again, what we're going to do is we're going to be changing this title, and you want to keep track of this button. There is something a little bit different, but it's not that huge. It's the fact that now what you're going to do is when you click on this button, you're going to be taken back to this main page over here. So you just want to keep track of these two things. So let's look at the IDs. This one is called display name, and it's a text view. And then this is a button right here, and it's simply called button 2. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to contact activity, do the same thing again, create two variables, call one of them display name, and it's going to be a text view, and then give the other one the, let's call it button 3. So it's our third button. And it's going to be from the button class. Now we're going to be assigning these variables in. So for our display name, I'm going to use find view by ID. Right in here are .id, display name. And for here, I'm going to write button 3, find view by ID, r.id button 2. Okay, I'm just going to quickly double check, and it's called button 2. Cool. So here for button 2, sorry, for button 3, I'm going to set an on-click listener. And we set our display name to a different text, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to create a username, and we're going to call it username like title. Okay, so it's nothing too crazy. And we're going to get the string extra. And remember that from before we had passed it in as username 2. So that is what we're going to be getting here. So we're going to be getting it in as username 2. And for the display name, for the text specifically, I am going to be using username 2, and it's simply going to be thanks for visiting. And actually, because we made sure that this was here, so I'm going to write username title. It's going to use the name that we extracted. Of our button click, we want to make sure that when we click on our button for this contact page, it takes us back to our first page. So for that, we're going to be creating another intent. So let's call this intent 3. And in here for this intent, you want to make sure that you are importing class if you see that red thing pop up. And this is going to take us to our main activity page, right? So it takes us back to our home screen, which is linked to our main activity Kotlin page. And yeah, so you want to make sure you're referencing your main activity, and then we're just going to be calling class.java. And from here, we're going to write start activity and pass in intent 3. and then right here, write finish. So we write finish here because essentially when we click on the button for this contact page, we want to make sure that this contact activity is removed from something called a backstack. And that has more to do with like memory, but after that, you just want to write finish to make sure that gets removed. In the video, I'll be showing you guys how to add some sound in. So, you want a little popping sound whenever you go from button to button. I'll show you guys that in the next video. So stay tuned. Thanks for watching, everyone. Bye. Take care.